Greetings, loyal soldiers of the Terran Republic, and indeed members of those other, lesser factions that we are currently using for target practice in PlanetSide 2. I am Yuzril, and this is the tale of fail, sucking so you don't have to. Today's episode was going to be a quick look at the Terran Republic's premier sniper rifle, the Rams 50M. Half an inch of rebel purging, heretic silencing death. Unfortunately, like all good plans, it didn't quite work out that way. Sony were nice enough to put in the weapon trial feature. I'm sure you've all seen this. It allows you to unlock a weapon you haven't purchased for 30 minutes to have at least a quick go with it and decide if it's worth spending certs, or for that matter hard-earned cash, to get it. Now, we'll have a quick look at the certifications you get with this weapon, because they're curious, to say the least. Let's bring this up. There we go. So, the suppressor, fair enough, kind of defeats the point, given that it hurts performance long range. Various scopes, again, makes sense, trading field of view for magnification. Forward grip on a sniper rifle? Why? Under what circumstances does a cert add-on that helps recoil in full auto fire help with a weapon that is by definition single shot and has a fairly long cycle time? The answer is of course it doesn't. I also have to wonder where the high velocity ammunition went. Maybe we just get that as standard. Anyhow, the weapon itself was commendably accurate, even if my bullets did seem to have a disturbing tendency to wink out of existence at about 500 yards give or take, which kind of defeats the purpose of a sniper rifle. But quickly bored with shooting at the landscape and using that to judge bullet drop, of which there seems to be surprisingly little, I decided to go and hunt some slightly more challenging game. The problem with doing this video at what by server time was a fairly ungodly hour is that there wasn't much action going on Waterson. So to Crimson Bluff I did go, in the hopes of finding somebody to shoot. Insert my drop pod, and one handy little trick that I've had some mileage out of is that if you're attacking an enemy tower and podding in as an infiltrator, then there is something to be said for landing on the roof of the tower, or at least the comms arrays. Most people tend not to look up, after all. The odds of anyone being up here are fairly remote. As you can see, it appears to be more or less deserted. Of course, the whole base was more or less deserted, except for the mighty mailed fist of the Terran Republic, and a few other people dropping in to say hi. But notably devoid of new conglomerate targets. This would normally be an excellent sniper perch. Unfortunately, someone disagreed. And for the record, how the balls did a heavy assault get up there without my hearing a drop pod? I suppose he could have been hidden in that little blank gap, but I couldn't see anything when I frame by frame that. So, with the first plan thoroughly scuppered, it was down onto the ground with the rest of the soldiers of the Republic, the loyal and brave defenders, and in the meantime tried to find the little sod who just ventilated my skull. Well, that may have been him, but he wasn't hanging around to be shot at, and a little addition from the Vanu. Finally, a target worth shooting at. Line up, take the shot. And, well, I can't really estimate how effective the weapon was because, let's face it, a pair of 120mm cannon tend to leave enough of a hole that you can't judge where the half-inch bullet went. Anyhow, back up and scope onto the tower, and again, the new conglomerate were nowhere to be seen. Yeah. A distinct lack of opposition. It would be a pity. The one time that I actually wanted the little rebel scum to show up, with the possible exception of that Vanu there, but this was a definite long shot to begin with, and of course I missed. Of course I've no idea if the bullet even calculated that far out, but there's no way to tell. And having failed in the use of an anti-aircraft roll, it was back to failing to find any more new conglomerates to shoot. Sometime later, having grown bored both of waiting for the NC to actually show up to the fight, and indeed further work on either the binomial theorem or the dynamics of an asteroid, I decided to head south and see if there was a counterattack developing. There was a brief hint of some action, a lone Vanu weapon trail fading miserably against the ground and the Araxian sun, but of the Vanu there was no immediate sign. The little git had clearly legged it the moment he fired and missed, as so many Vanu do. Unfortunately, further questing south proved pointless. Indeed, there was even a brief moment where my minimap showed a lone new conglomerate dot, but such false reports were clearly the result of sabotage. In the meantime, the Vanu had actually grown a spine. Unfortunately, he had then had it broken in an accident with a Prowler tank. Loyal citizens of Araxis, I remind you of the rules of the road on this world. The tank has right of way. Most definitely when it comes to pedestrians, at least. With drop pods impacting to the west at the Rust Mesa lookout, I decided to find myself a convenient perch and take a few more shots with the rams. Maybe here, at a safe distance, a challenging distance for any marksman, I would be able to see if the rifle was actually worth the resources the Republic had spent developing it. And lo and behold, there were actually targets. A simple shot, an easy hit. Maybe I had aimed a little low, for he was not dead. May even have been the extreme range. Remember, the Terran Republic frowns upon excess powder charges in rounds, for such is considered to be a waste of Araxian resources. However, further shots would prove awkward because the little sods would not stand still long enough, testament merely to my deficiencies as a sniper, something I hope to remedy with practice. And it must be noted the travel time of the bullet. Anyone would think the little gits knew I was aiming at them. I'm quite sure they did not, for I was a safe distance away, and indeed, when certain targets did not remember to move, they were easily hit. Even at ranges that would defeat most common weapons, the Rams 50 proved itself a tried and true weapon. Any deficiencies of marksmanship you see here are purely mine. The Terran Republic armory does not include such dubious weapons as the Vanu or the new conglomerate, which, despite claiming to be snipers, cannot hit the broadside of a barn. My further incompetence as a marksman stands before you, ladies and gentlemen. You would think I could have hit this chap on the run, but no, he proved disconcertingly awkward to track. It must be noted, of course, that I had all of 10 minutes experience with this weapon, but that is no excuse. I also have no idea where that shot came from. Happily, he was unable to make a follow-up shot, so I followed standard infiltrated doctrine. Cloak up, disappear, and then very carefully peek your head round a different corner of the rock you are at to see if you can identify where the shooter came from. And failing that, find a different rock entirely, so as to fox him. Not that it should require much effort to outfox a Vanu sniper, or indeed a new conglomerate sniper, for they are lacking even the wit to join the Terran Republic, so their tactical acumen may be expected to be similarly stunted. Unfortunately, so were my rock climbing abilities. By this point, in this brief little diversion, our fellow troopers had stormed the Mesa. There was little sniper action to be had at this point, but in hope more than anything else, I found myself a quiet little shadowed corner, cloaked up, and waited to see if any targets presented themselves. Hope was, of course, the first step on the road to disappointment, because nothing did. With the Mesa now firmly overrun, there was unlikely to be any further sniper action, so once again I decided to close the range and see if my trusty silenced pistol would supply anything of note, or indeed, maybe I would get the opportunity to see how the Rams 50 performed at close range. Here's a hint. Not very well, if those crosshairs are anything to judge by. Still encountering little or no resistance, the Terran Republic forces surged on towards the Rashnu biolab. Indeed, about the only resistance being encountered was one new conglomerate infiltrator, who forgot that cloaking and decloaking makes a very audible noise, and promptly got a 50 cal to the head for his trouble. I have to say I'm in two minds about the Ram's 50. On the one hand, it is a very effective sniper rifle. It is accurate out to several hundred yards, practically to the render limit of the bullet, and it does enough damage that against most targets at most usual engagement ranges, a headshot is probably going to be a clean kill, even against a heavy assault. It still struggles against max suits, which is what you'd expect, given that max suits are pretty much tanks par excellence, and obviously against tanks all it really does is advertise your position. In effect, it's an M77B with both the advantages, the high damage and the high accuracy, and the drawbacks, namely the staggeringly slow rate of fire, turned up to 11. So if you like the M77, you'll like this weapon probably more. And if you don't, then I suggest you find yourself something else, preferably full auto. I will leave you, ladies and gentlemen, with the news that the Vanu are resorting to improvised anti-air. It did not save them. I have been Yusril, and loyal soldiers of the Republic, remember, loyalty beyond death. Until next time, if there is one, farewell.